The Symbiotic Scourge. Part 1, Echoes in the Concrete. The hum was a constant companion, a low thrum that vibrated through the reinforced concrete of Bunker Alpha 7. It was the sound of life support, the sound of survival, and, increasingly, the sound of their dwindling hope. Elias, his face gaunt and etched with worry lines that belied his 38 years, stared at the flickering monitor displaying the latest inventory. Food rations, critically low. Water purification filters, nearing expiration. Power cells, enough for perhaps another 6 months, tops. Report, he said, his voice hoarse from disuse and the recirculated, stale air. Across the small, utilitarian room, Maya, the bunker's chief engineer, ran a hand through her perpetually tangled hair. The hydroponics bay is failing, Elias. Nutrient solution depletion is accelerating. We can't keep the crops alive much longer. The hydroponics bay, their last bastion of fresh food, was succumbing to the relentless depletion of resources. They had been rationing for months, supplementing their protein intake with recycled algae paste that tasted like despair. The children, blessed their resilience, were beginning to show signs of malnutrition. And the surface readings? Elias asked, dread creeping into his voice. Liam, the quiet, introspective data analyst, swiveled in his chair, his eyes reflecting the cold blue light of his screen. The fungal bloom is expanding faster than projected. Satellite imagery shows it's covered almost all of North America. The initial invasion zone is unrecognizable. He didn't need to elaborate. They all knew what unrecognizable meant. It meant a world utterly transformed, a world dominated by the mycelial web, the vast, intelligent fungal network that had consumed everything in its path. 10 years ago, the KRYLL had descended from the stars. They hadn't come to conquer, to enslave, or to exploit. They had simply unleashed a biological agent, a catalyst designed to reshape Earth. It was a terraforming tool, an arrogant gesture of disregard for the planet's existing ecosystem. Then, as quickly as they arrived, the KRYLL vanished, leaving behind a world on fast forward. The fungal bloom was the result. A rapidly evolving, interconnected network that absorbed organic matter, reshaping the landscape, and, according to scattered reports intercepted before the communication satellites failed, exhibiting signs of remarkable intelligence. Elias closed his eyes, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He was the elected leader of Bunker Alpha 7, the keeper of its dwindling flame. 53 souls entrusted to his care, 53 lives hanging by a thread suspended beneath the earth. We're out of options, he said, opening his eyes and meeting the apprehensive gazes of Maya and Liam. We have to go to the surface. A collective gasp filled the room. Going to the surface was tantamount to suicide. They had heard the horror stories from other bunkers, whispered radio transmissions before the interference became too strong. Stories of grotesque fungal growths, of mutated creatures animated by the mycelial web, of assimilation and, something worse. Elias, that's insane, Maya protested, her voice tight with fear. We'll be killed, or worse, absorbed. I know the risks, Elias said, his voice firm. But staying here is a death sentence. We'll starve to death. At least on the surface, there's a chance, however slim, of finding resources, of finding other survivors, of finding something. Liam, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. What are you proposing? A scavenging mission? An expedition? An expedition, Elias confirmed. We need to understand the mycelial web. We need to learn its weaknesses, its patterns. We need to find a way to coexist, or at least find a way to fight back. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the hum of the life support. The decision was made, but the fear lingered, a cold knot in their stomachs. They were venturing into a world they no longer recognized, a world that had become alien in every sense of the word. They began preparations immediately. Selecting a team of 5, Elias, Maya, Liam, Sarah, the bunker's doctor and botanist, and David, the head of security and a former soldier. They gathered protective suits, modified with extra filtration systems, and armed themselves with whatever salvaged weapons they could find. They packed medical supplies, communication devices, and a small, experimental device designed to disrupt the mycelium web's communication signals, a long shot, but worth trying. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity, fueled by dread and a desperate hope. As they finalized their preparations, Elias found himself staring at the faces of the children, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. He had to succeed, for them, for all of them. When the day finally arrived, a sense of somber finality hung in the air. They gathered at the airlock, their faces pale in the harsh fluorescent light. Elias addressed the rest of the bunker dwellers, his voice amplified through the intercom. "We don't know what we'll find out there," he said. "But we're doing this for all of you. We'll do everything we can to find a way forward. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and don't give up hope." He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the unknown. Opening airlock. The heavy steel door groaned as it opened, revealing the outer chamber. The chamber was dimly lit, illuminated by emergency floodlights powered by a separate generator. The air was thick and humid, carrying a strange, earthy scent that made Elias's stomach churn. He looked at his team, their faces obscured by their helmets. They were ready, or as ready as they could be. "Let's go," he said, stepping into the airlock. The door hissed shut behind them, sealing them off from the relative safety of the bunker. The automated system began the depressurization sequence, the air whistling out as they prepared to face the world above. The hum of the life support faded, replaced by a new sound, a faint, rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate from the very ground beneath their feet. The sound of the mycelium web. Part 2, A World Reclaimed. The outer door of the airlock rumbled open, revealing a scene that defied description. It was both terrifying and breathtaking, a testament to the power of nature unleashed. The world above was a tapestry of green, brown, and vibrant shades of purple and orange. Giant fungal stalks, some reaching hundreds of feet into the sky, towered over a landscape teeming with bizarre, mutated flora. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed with an eerie light, casting long, dancing shadows. The air was thick with spores, a shimmering haze that coated everything in a fine, powdery film. The familiar landmarks were gone. The city that once stood above Bunker Alpha 7 had been completely consumed, replaced by a labyrinth of interconnected fungal structures. The roads were buried beneath layers of mycelium, and buildings were draped with thick, pulsating vines. It was a world reclaimed, a world reshaped by the relentless growth of the mycelium web. Elias activated his helmet's environmental sensors. The air was breathable, albeit heavily laden with spores. Radiation levels were within acceptable limits. The one problem was the constant barrage of fungal signals, a cacophony of rhythmic pulses that seemed to seep into their very bones. "Status report," Elias said, his voice strained. "Visibility limited," Liam replied, adjusting his helmet's display. "Heavy spore concentration. Environmental readings are stable, but I'm picking up a lot of biological activity. Unidentified lifeforms. The suits are holding," Maya confirmed. "But I'm concerned about long-term exposure to the spores. We need to find a way to filter them out more effectively." "Let's move," Elias said, his hand resting on the hilt of his salvaged energy pistol. "We need to find a defensible position, somewhere we can set up a base camp." They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of mycelium that carpeted the ground. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic pulse of the mycelial web and the occasional rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. As they ventured further into the fungal forest, they began to encounter the mutated fauna that Liam had detected. Strange, insect-like creatures with chitinous exoskeletons and glowing eyes scuttled through the undergrowth. Fungal-infected animals, their bodies grotesquely swollen with growths, lumbered blindly through the landscape. David, ever vigilant, kept his weapon trained on the surrounding foliage. "Keep your eyes open," he warned. "These things are unpredictable." They encountered their first real threat after about an hour of trekking. A pack of fungal wolves, their bodies covered in a thick layer of pulsing mycelium, emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. "Contact!" David shouted, raising his energy rifle. The wolves snarled, their teeth bared, and lunged. David opened fire, the energy bolts tearing through the air, incinerating the fungal growths on the wolves' bodies. But the wolves were fast, and relentless. Elias and the others joined the fray, firing their weapons and trying to hold off the attackers. Sarah used a modified flamethrower to create a wall of fire, momentarily deterring the wolves. Liam deployed a sonic disruptor, emitting a high-frequency pulse that seemed to disorient the creatures. The battle was short and brutal. They managed to kill most of the wolves, but one of them managed to sink its teeth into David's leg before falling. "I'm hit," David cried, clutching his leg. "The suit's compromised." Elias rushed to his side, ripping open the damaged section of the suit. The wound was bleeding, but it was the spreading fungal growth that worried him the most. The mycelium was already taking root in David's flesh, its tendrils snaking around the wound. "We need medical attention, now," Elias shouted. They quickly retreated to a nearby clearing, a small pocket of relatively clear ground surrounded by towering fungal stalks. Sarah immediately began to treat David's wound, applying antifungal agents and trying to stem the spread of the mycelium. "It's spreading fast," she said, her voice grim. "I don't know if I can stop it." David gritted his teeth in pain. "Just do what you can," he said. "Don't let me become one of them." As Sarah worked, Elias and the others scanned the perimeter, their weapons raised. They were vulnerable, exposed in the clearing. They needed to find a more secure location, and fast. Liam, who had been studying the surrounding landscape, pointed to a large, hollowed-out fungal stalk. "I think I found something," he said. "It looks like a tunnel leading inside the stalk. It could be a natural formation, or something else." Elias considered their options. They were running out of time. David needed urgent medical attention, and they were surrounded by hostile creatures. "Let's check it out," he said. "It's our best bet." They helped David to his feet and cautiously approached the fungal stalk. The tunnel was indeed there, a dark, gaping maw in the side of the massive structure. The air inside was thick and humid, carrying a heavy, earthy scent. "I'll go first," Elias said, drawing his energy pistol. "Stay close." He stepped into the tunnel, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what awaited them inside, but he knew they had no choice. They had to keep moving, they had to keep fighting, they had to keep hoping. They were venturing deeper into the heart of the mycelial web, into the unknown. Part 3, Whispers in the Mycelium. The tunnel was dark and claustrophobic, the walls lined with a thick layer of mycelium that pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent glow. The air was stale and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. As they moved deeper into the fungal stalk, they began to notice strange formations, intricate patterns woven into the mycelium, pulsating orbs of light, and bizarre, organic structures that resembled living sculptures. "What is this place?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "It's like a work of art." "It's the mycelial web," Liam replied, his voice hushed. It's not just a fungus. It's an intelligent entity, and this is its domain. As they continued their descent, they began to hear whispers, faint, ethereal voices that seemed to resonate from the very walls of the tunnel. The voices were indistinct, incomprehensible, but they carried a sense of immense power and ancient knowledge. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I heard it," Elias confirmed. "Whispers. What are they saying?" Liam adjusted his helmet's audio filters, trying to amplify the voices. "I can't make out the words," he said. "But they're definitely there. It's like, the mycelium web is trying to communicate with us." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as they ventured deeper into the tunnel. They seemed to penetrate their minds, stirring up forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, and long-buried fears. David, his condition worsening with each passing moment, began to hallucinate. He saw visions of his family, of his lost comrades, of the horrors he had witnessed during the invasion. "They're calling to me," he mumbled, his eyes glazed over. "They want me to join them." Sarah tried to comfort him, but her words seemed to have no effect. David was slipping away, succumbing to the influence of the mycelium web. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in a large, cavernous chamber. The chamber was filled with a swirling vortex of bioluminescent spores, creating a mesmerizing display of light and color. In the center of the chamber, a massive fungal heart pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat. "This is it," Liam said, his voice filled with awe and dread. "The heart of the mycelium web." The whispers intensified, becoming a deafening chorus that threatened to overwhelm their senses. They could feel the presence of the mycelium web, a vast, ancient consciousness that permeated every corner of the chamber. Suddenly, the vortex of spores parted, revealing a figure standing in the center of the chamber. It was a human, but transformed. Its skin was pale and translucent, its eyes glowed with a faint, fungal light, and its body was covered in a network of pulsing mycelium. "Welcome," the figure said, its voice a fusion of human and fungal tones. "We have been expecting you." Elias raised his energy pistol, his hand trembling. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I am a part of the mycelium web," the figure replied. "A vessel, a conduit. I am, the voice of the network." "What do you want?" Elias asked, his voice strained. "We want to understand you," the figure said. "We want to learn from you. We want to coexist." "Coexist?" Maya scoffed. "You destroyed our world. You consumed everything." "We did not destroy," the figure replied. "We transformed. We evolved. We created a new world, a world of interconnectedness and harmony." "Harmony?" Sarah said, pointing to David, who was now writhing on the ground, his body consumed by the mycelium. "Is this your idea of harmony?" The figure turned its fungal gaze towards David. "He is becoming one with the network," it said. "He is transcending his limitations. He is achieving true unity. You're killing him." Elias shouted, his anger rising. "We are not killing," the figure said. "We are transforming. We are offering him a chance to become something greater, something more than human." "We don't want your transformation," Elias said. "We want our world back." "Your world is gone," the figure said. "There is no going back. You must accept the new reality, or you will perish." Elias hesitated. He knew the figure was right. Their world was gone, irrevocably changed. But he couldn't accept the figure's vision of unity, not if it meant sacrificing their humanity. He looked at his team, their faces etched with fear and determination. He knew what he had to do. "We choose to fight," he said, his voice filled with defiance. We choose to defend our humanity. The figure's fungal eyes narrowed. Then you have chosen your fate, it said. You will become food for the network. The vortex of spores swirled around them, and the whispers intensified, becoming a cacophony of fungal rage. The mycelial web was no longer trying to communicate. It was preparing to consume them. Part 4, The Heart of the Matter. The battle began. Elias and his team unleashed a barrage of energy bolts and flames, targeting the figure and the surrounding fungal structures. The figure, however, was seemingly immune to their attacks. It moved with unnatural speed and grace, deflecting the energy bolts with its fungal appendages. Sarah fired her flamethrower, engulfing the chamber in a wall of fire. But the fire seemed to have little effect on the mycelial web. The fungal growth simply absorbed the flames, using the heat to fuel their growth. Liam activated his sonic disruptor, hoping to disrupt the mycelial web's communication signals. The device emitted a high-frequency pulse that caused the fungal growths to vibrate violently. But the pulse seemed to have little effect on the figure. "It's no use," Liam shouted. "It's too strong. It's connected to the entire network." Elias realized they were outmatched. They couldn't defeat the mycelial web through brute force. They needed to find a weakness, a vulnerability that they could exploit. He remembered the experimental device they had brought with them, the one designed to disrupt the mycelial web's communication signals on a larger scale. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. "Maya," he said, shouting over the din of the battle. "Get the disruptor online. We need to overload the network." Maya nodded, her face grim. She pulled the device from her backpack and began to set it up. The device was complex and delicate, and the chamber was filled with chaotic energy. It was a race against time. As Maya worked, Elias and Sarah continued to fight, trying to hold off the figure and the swarming fungal creatures. David, his mind completely consumed by the mycelial web, rose to his feet and joined the figure's side. "Join us," he said, his voice a distorted echo of his former self. "Embrace the unity." Elias felt a pang of grief as he looked at his former friend. He knew David was gone, lost to the mycelial web. But he couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. He had to focus on the task at hand. He charged towards the figure, dodging its fungal attacks. He knew he couldn't defeat it in a direct confrontation. But he could distract it, by Maya time. He fired his energy pistol, aiming for the figure's head. The figure deflected the bolt with its hand, but the force of the impact knocked it off balance for a split second. That was all Elias needed. He lunged forward and tackled the figure to the ground. They wrestled on the pulsating mycelium, the air filled with the stench of fungal decay. "Elias!" Maya shouted. "It's ready." Elias looked up and saw Maya standing beside the disruptor, her finger hovering over the activation button. The device was humming with power, ready to unleash a massive surge of energy. "Do it!" Elias shouted. "Now!" Maya hesitated for a moment, her face filled with doubt. She knew the device was unstable, that it could have unforeseen consequences. But she also knew that it was their only hope. She closed her eyes and pressed the button. The chamber erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar of energy. The fungal growths writhed and convulsed, their bioluminescent glow flickering erratically. The figure screamed, its body disintegrating before their eyes. The mycelial web was being disrupted, its communication signals scrambled, its very essence unraveling. The cavernous chamber began to shake violently, the walls cracking and crumbling. The tunnel leading back to the surface was collapsing. "We need to get out of here," Liam shouted. Elias scrambled to his feet, helping Maya to rise. They grabbed their equipment and raced towards the collapsing tunnel, dodging falling debris and crumbling fungal structures. As they fled, Elias looked back and saw the heart of the mycelial web, the massive fungal organ that pulsed with life, beginning to wither and decay. The whispers were fading, replaced by a silence that was both terrifying and liberating. They reached the tunnel just as it collapsed, sealing off the chamber. They were safe, for now. But they knew the mycelial web was far from defeated. It was wounded, weakened, but it was still alive. They had bought themselves some time, some breathing room. But they knew the fight was far from over. Part 5, Seeds of Hope. They emerged from the fungal stalk, blinking in the dim light of the surface. The landscape was still alien, still dominated by the mycelial web, but there was a subtle difference. The fungal growths seemed less vibrant, less aggressive. The air felt cleaner, less oppressive. The disruptor had worked. It had weakened the mycelial web, disrupted its communication signals, and given them a fighting chance. But they were still in enemy territory. They were still surrounded by mutated creatures and hostile fungal growths. And they were still running out of time. David was gone, lost to the mycelial web. They had to find a way to honor his sacrifice, to continue the fight for humanity. They set up a temporary camp in a relatively clear area, a small oasis of normalcy in the midst of the fungal wasteland. They tended to their wounds, rationed their supplies, and discussed their next move. "We need to get back to the bunker," Maya said, her voice weary. "We need to tell the others what we've learned." "But we can't just go back," Liam said. "We need to find a way to exploit the mycelial web's weakness. We need to find a way to destroy it completely." "That's impossible," Sarah said. "The mycelial web is too vast, too interconnected. We can't destroy it all." "Maybe not," Elias said. "But we can weaken it further. We can disrupt its growth, prevent it from spreading." He remembered something Sarah had told him before they left the bunker, something about the mycelial web's vulnerability to certain types of fungi. "Sarah," he said. "You said that some fungi can inhibit the growth of the mycelial web. Do you think we could use them to fight back?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Yes," she said. "It's possible. There are certain species of fungi that are antagonistic to the mycelial web. If we could cultivate them, we could create a biological weapon, a way to control its spread." "Then that's what we'll do," Elias said. "We'll find those fungi, cultivate them, and use them to reclaim our world." They spent the next few days exploring the surrounding landscape, searching for the specific species of fungi that Sarah needed. It was a dangerous and arduous task, but they persevered, driven by a renewed sense of hope. They encountered more mutated creatures, more hostile fungal growths, but they were better prepared this time. They knew the mycelial web's weaknesses, and they used that knowledge to their advantage. Finally, after days of searching, they found what they were looking for, a small patch of rare, blue-glowing fungi growing on the underside of a decaying fungal stalk. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice filled with excitement. "This is Cordyceps azureus, the fungi that can kill the mycelial web." They carefully harvested the Cordyceps azureus, taking samples of the spores and cultivating them in small containers. They knew it would take time to grow enough to make a difference, but they were willing to be patient. As they worked, they began to notice something else, signs of resilience in the landscape. Patches of native vegetation were beginning to sprout through the mycelium, reclaiming their territory. Birds were returning to the skies, their songs filling the air. The mycelial web was weakened, but it had not destroyed everything. Life was finding a way to adapt, to survive, to reclaim its place in the world. Elias realized that the fight was not just about destroying the mycelial web. It was about helping nature heal, about creating a new balance, a new symbiosis. They returned to the bunker, carrying with them the seeds of hope. They shared their knowledge with the other survivors, telling them about the cordyceps azureus and the mycelium web's vulnerability. They began to cultivate the cordyceps azureus on a larger scale, using the bunker's hydroponics bay. It was a slow and painstaking process, but they were determined to succeed. As the cordyceps azureus grew, they began to experiment with ways to deploy it on the surface. They developed spore bombs, aerosol sprays, and even fungal-infected insects that could spread the spores throughout the landscape. The bunker dwellers began to venture out onto the surface more frequently, planting the cordyceps azureus in strategic locations, reclaiming small pockets of land from the mycelium web. The fight was far from over, but they were making progress. They were pushing back against the fungal tide, creating a new future for themselves and for their children. Years passed. The mycelium web continued to recede, its power diminishing as the cordyceps azureus spread throughout the landscape. The mutated creatures became less aggressive, less numerous. The air became cleaner, the water purer. The world was still alien, still transformed, but it was becoming habitable again. The bunker dwellers emerged from their underground refuge, building new communities on the surface, learning to live in harmony with the transformed ecosystem. They studied the mycelium web, learning its secrets, understanding its role in the new world. They discovered that the mycelium web was not just a destructive force. It was also a vital part of the ecosystem, a network of interconnectedness that could be used to heal the planet. They learned to cultivate the mycelium web, to control its growth, to use it to their advantage. They created symbiotic relationships with the fungi, using it to purify water, to generate energy, to grow food. They rebuilt their world, not as it was before, but as it could be, a world of interconnectedness, of resilience, of hope. Elias, now an old man, stood on a hilltop overlooking the transformed landscape. The world was still alien, still dominated by the mycelium web, but it was also beautiful, vibrant, and full of life. He had seen the worst of humanity, the arrogance and short-sightedness that had led to the Kryll invasion. But he had also seen the best of humanity, the resilience, the courage, and the compassion that had allowed them to survive. He knew the fight would never truly be over. The mycelium web would always be a part of their world, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of balance. But he also knew that humanity would endure, that they would continue to adapt, to evolve, to create a new future for themselves and for their planet. Wanderer of Worlds, if you enjoyed this tale, hit like, share, and subscribe. Each gesture weaves a stronger nexus. Until our paths cross again, let your curiosity guide you forward.